Hello and welcome to the monthly AWS What's New live stream presented by Enterprise Support. Hey Carlos, hey Rovan, how you doing?
Hey Matt, how's everything?
Howdy. Very, very, very good. I thought we had a bit of a jump start there on the countdown, but I wasn't too sure if we were going to go a bit early or not, but it's good to go.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting to our viewers today, we've got a rookie director today in behind the scenes. So
Live from the Hilton, from the looks of it.
Live from the Hilton. Any hiccups, please feel free to throw your banter in the chat and have a couple jokes at my expense. We'd love a good laugh.
That's all right. If it gets too bad, Carlos, we'll just mute you. That'll be fine.
Perfect.
Rovan, how are you?
I'm good. Back after being down last time with COVID, recovered, all good.
Good to have you back.
Thank you. We've got Mark
And
away today, school holidays.
That's right.
Having some time with the kids, which is really good.
Well, if we're lucky, he might even be tuning in live too. We'll have to follow up with him just to check.
Quiz him.
Is it I can see some blue sky behind you, Roves. Is that a bit of a sign that the rain's starting to slow down?
Thank goodness. Yeah, we've been in a really interesting weather in Sydney for about a week and floods in some areas. I hope all of our audience are safe and dry and out of the flooding zone.
Yeah, I hope so too. You guys have some guests for us this week.
Indeed. I've got my awesome Liang on the security part.
Yeah, and I've got Samir, who's been almost a resident person on this live stream as well, giving us some really insightful information on databases. So I'm looking forward to our chat later on in the stream.
I think we can soon upgrade them to friends of the show instead of just occasional guests.
I think so.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, let's kick off. I'm really keen to see some of the security, database, and compute changes that we're going to talk about today. Rovan, over to you for security.
Awesome. Let's bring Liang. Hey, very easy. How you going, Liang?
Hey, hi Rovan. Hi Matt. Hi Carlos. Thanks so much for the invite again. Yeah, really excited to be here today to share a little more about the new features that's available for our customers. Yep.
Awesome. What you've been up to since we had you about 2 months ago or so?
Yep. So this past couple of months been pretty exciting. So we've been doing a lot of different type of testings, a lot of questions regarding layer 7 attacks and features that were made available. And of course, the final feature that we'll be sharing, we had a roadshow for that about how we can ingest config findings into Security Hub and how we can take actions for that. So yeah, we'll have a deep dive on it pretty soon. Yep.
That's awesome. So I know you prepared us actually three, but two packed under one service. Wow. New announcement security today. So let's start with our hero of the show, security today. Wow. So capture is now generally available, which is quite awesome. I wish we had that even earlier than this. I really needed it a lot in the last couple of months and so on. Maybe let's start with what is Firewall Manager first for any of our audience who don't know what SWAF is about.
Yep. So yeah, thanks for that. So yeah, Web Application Firewall, or AWS WAF for short, it's a way for us to deploy a cloud native service to help stop attacks at layer 7, or even just to inspect all these different types of traffics that are coming in. So you have your attack methods like structured query language injection or SQL injection, where the hackers are trying to get to the backend database and pull out all this different information, or even just to be able to change information on the backend database systems. Or it could be cross-site scripting, where the bad actors are trying to inject their own script into the browser, and once the user hit onto the link, then they get redirection maybe to the hacker's website, or they get their cookies being sent over into the hacker's site where they can reuse it and log in into the user's account. So Web Application Firewall, AWS WAF, is built just for blocking on this type of layer 7 attacks.
Awesome. And it's worth to mention as well, layer 7 is the most complex type of attacks. Unlike the layer 4 and layer 3 and UDP, flooding and so on, and think attack, layer 7 usually known to be the most sophisticated because it's an application layer. All right. So, how can Capture now be useful to our customers? How can they benefit from it?
Yep, Ruben. So yeah, we are seeing growing number of cyber attacks against all these different types of website applications that, especially for those who are deploying out onto the internet and from bots. So what happened is it is critical for our customers to be able to ascertain and differentiate between a user and a bot. So by placing CAPTCHA, we can challenge the user, all right, so that we can confirm that the request came from a person, came from a human, and not from a automated bot that is trying to inject all these different type of payloads into the site. And I have my workloads being targeted by plenty of bots. So of course, one of the common and really popular example is Log4j, right? So late last year when Log4j was announced, it was exposed. Within 48, 72 hours, I was seeing a huge spike in the number of different types of payloads, like JNDI requests, LDAP requests hitting into my service, even though I do not host any of those types of processing. And then after that, all these bad bots are built really quickly. So the bad actors, they update their bots so that they can begin injecting all these payloads into the different target sites. So with that, CAPTCHA in place, the moment we can confirm there's a bad payload, and at the same time can confirm it is a bad bot, then for sure, with these two metrics in place, we can quickly block out this IP address for, say, a set period of time before the bad actors or the bots gain further and further access into the site. And with that, I also want to take this chance, all right, to maybe pose a question back to Rowan. If you have any other use cases where our customers could benefit from the deployment of CAPTCHA in their applications.
Yeah, it's actually a question triggered a memory in my head was about 2 years ago. So one of my customers got DDoSed, layer 7. They didn't really have at that point WAF or Shield Advanced or any kind of protection mechanisms. The website was just fronted by an ELB, which was good in a sense. ELB started to scale up to absorb the increase in traffic and increase of requests, but their website obviously were under attack. So we needed to work with them and act really fast. And one of the mechanisms we actually added there was implementing AWS WAF ASAP, enabling rate limit to limit the number of requests that the website can accept from certain IPs. And once that threshold's been exceeded, block it or stop receiving any requests from these IPs. And from that, we were able to identify a couple of pods outside of the region that were targeting the website. So we've got the IP addresses from the logs, and we added to blacklisted IPs in WAF. And by that, we actually blocked the attack. And we also enabled Shield Advance and got our internal DRT team to analyze the logs and help us as well with more rules within WAF to make sure the website is safe. So definitely, if you do have a public-facing website, it's highly recommend to protect it with WAF and Shield Advance as much as possible to kind of free your mind with all of these sophisticated attacks, especially on layer 7. It's quite complex. With layer 4 and 3, you need also to be protected against these, but with layer 7, you need to do lots of sometimes engineering to be able to identify where is the attack from, what is targeting in your website, and block that. So it does take time to identify these elements, and WAF does this a really good protection for you.
Hey, Liang, just a quick one. Can we protect a certain URI, as in, for example, just the login page to throw up that CAPTCHA? Or is it generally kind of you just protect the whole site? How does that work?
Yep, Matt, thanks for the question. So, yep, exactly. Those are the use cases that our customers are requesting for. So you could have use cases where in the login, which is a more critical part of the site, or so the URI part, and you want to have CAPTCHA inserted into the login protection, or you want CAPTCHA inserted to different, more sensitive plugins, sensitive accesses, sensitive pages, and you want to challenge the user first. So this is the place where you can then decide what are the different types of rules that you want to place in, and CAPTCHA could be one of them, in order to run further inspection, analysis, and then to decide whether you're going to block or allow the traffic to go in and out. Yep, so Matt, back to your question, absolutely right.
I guess
Nice one.
also awesome about CAPTCHA is it's helped eliminate automated pods, because it slows down the traffic significantly. So even with rate limit, with a customer, the attacker realized that the pod started being blocked because we started to put the IPs into blacklisted. We identified they kicking all of the thresholds and getting blocked. So they shifted the mechanism to attack very slowly. And then rate limits, we were lowering as well our threshold, but with CAPTCHA, they cannot actually use pods. It's just their attacking away will be destroyed straight away, because they have to be at their computer trying to say, here is, I see this screen, and then I go through the CAPTCHA. So straight away reduce it from a very aggressive automated pod that attacking the website to a human that can be mitigated quite fast. All good.
Yep.
So amazing announcement. Really glad to hear it out. I wish I had it when my customers got attacked at that point, but it was one of the most required product feature requests actually under WAF. So glad to see it out. So the other one under WAF as well, which is now WAF is adding or able to support inspecting more request headers. Maybe let's talk about why we need to inspect the headers or the request headers that our website receives.
Yep, Rovan. So in fact, this is exactly what we were just discussing about, where in the requests, right, you have many different headers option, and the headers option could be targeting the content type, hosts, IP addresses, and so on and so forth. So that is then sent to the backend, maybe a separate database. And in that database, for say analytics, for know your customer, all right, they want to know, okay, what are the device types, what are the different browsers that are coming in, and so on and so forth. So they would do some processing there. And as a result of that, what the bad actors are doing is that they could easily change up those values as they are sent over from the request all the way to the backend database. Meaning that if there's a backend database for analysis, then that could be susceptible to SQL injection attacks, and they could try to pull out all this different information coming from the database, all right? And as a result of that, what we need to do is to be able to inspect all of these request headers, especially if they're going to be stored on the backend, they're going to be processed somehow, so that we can block it before the malicious payloads go through and hit the application servers or hit onto the database servers, all right? And of course, going back to this feature is that what we can do now is, say we have a set of headers, all right, maybe content type, maybe user agent, and they're all going back to a backend database. So in that case, I don't have to create separate rules for each one of them to run different types of rules or inspections or even the similar ones. So now I can specify, all right, for all these different headers, I want them to be inspected for the same type of attack that can be coming in, so that I no longer have to keep track of multiple rules just because of each of the header when all of the inspection is ultimately the same. And perhaps I would like to pose this question back to the team too, Rover and Matt. Are there any other examples in which inspection of multiple request headers could be pretty useful for our customers too?
I guess it's a really good question, right? Because if you understand the application, you would be able to identify what type of headers should you actually receive, right? Because within the header itself, you get the language of the website, for example, the authentication, cookies, and so on. So if you know what your website would have, you would be able to block what you don't need. So it seems like what Liang was mentioning, and having to have cross-site scripting, for example. If there is any attempt from the hacker to do such a thing or play with the header, or inject anything in the header, you will be able to pick that up straight away and block it. So it's quite critical to know what your website, and that takes me actually to the other point, which is a lesson learned. I guess is going to be quite useful to our customers as well. With the protection mechanism from a security perspective to any public-facing workload, it's really important that you understand your website and the pattern of your usage. So, for example, what is the regular day-to-day load that you receive on your website? What type of requests do you get? That will help you identify, are you under attack, or this is business as usual? This is within the range that you receive every day or receive within the weekends or so on. So you gotta really get this pattern to make it easier for you to know, are you under attack or not? Because if you don't, you won't be really able to pick this up, especially if you don't have any security services to protect you or inspect the headers or alert you if you are under attack. You wouldn't know. Pods are getting smarter. They sometimes aggressive. They sometimes slow to see how they can go through, then start an aggressive attack afterwards. So knowing your website, knowing type of headers that you should accept, will allow you to define what else you have to block and also what is the normal traffic patterns that you receive on a daily basis. So try not to leave it till you get attacked. Get this knowledge beforehand so it becomes handy. Cool. All right, so moving to our last announcement today in security and AWS Security Hub. So it now does support and getting feeds from AWS config, either from custom and also managed evaluation role. So let's start first with Security Hub. If you haven't been using it, let's maybe introduce it to our customers.
Yep. So yeah, this is one of the most highly requested features from our customers. So AWS config is a resource configuration tracker and can help us check against the compliant state of resources. And AWS Security Hub is our security posture management service, all right, with the ability to aggregate security findings from multiple service providers like GuardDuty for threat detection, IAM Access Analyzer for outside of account or organization access. And previously, right before the availability of AWS config findings to Security Hub, we needed to have a custom Lambda with event bridge rule to pick up all these findings to be sent to Security Hub. But now, with this new feature, customers can simply enable the integration in Security Hub and begin seeing all these findings being sent over into Security Hub. And then you can quickly aggregate from there. Maybe it's related to a resource like EC2. Maybe it's perhaps some of the checks that you have for your IAM users and so on. And we can have all these findings, all these custom managed findings being streamed over into Security Hub.
So to summarize that, Leon, so what we're saying here, obviously config as a managed evaluation rule used to be streamed or fed to the Security Hub, there's no problem, but the custom rules that the customers create on their own, they need to add Lambda and some other services to be able to feed that to Security Hub. And with this announcement, they don't need to actually use Lambda anymore. It's automated, you can configure config customer evaluation rules to straight away feed within Security Hub. And actually, if you haven't used Security Hub before, it's one of these awesome services any security team will really highly value, because it's a pane of glass for all of the security services that AWS provide, because you get config, you get Macy, you get IAM Analyzer, you get all of our AWS services from a security perspective, get these findings and feed it to Security Hub. So you get a nice dashboard that shows all of these security findings from different services, so you don't have to jump in any of these. You just get one source of truth and go through them based on their priority as well. Nice. Well, that's really good. What do you think customers can do with these findings once they see it in Security Hub, Leon?
So, yep, thanks for sharing on the use cases of Security Hub. And as they begin, or our customers begin ingesting all of these findings, some of the questions that they have, especially if they've been using Security Hub for a while now, the question is, what can they do with all these findings? So, and of course, in this case, especially for config findings, right? So as you are having built many of your managed rules, custom rules, and you are beginning to see all these findings coming into Security Hub, you have hundreds, thousands of accounts, and they have all these different resources running, and all these are being streamed into your Security Hub Delegated Administrator. So what you can do is you can use batch update findings, all right, with just the target ID, product on, and then after which you can easily update the severity of the, say, normalized value and the label. So for example, if you have production environment and you have a tag for it. So as all these different findings have been streamed over in Security Hub, you could easily elevate their criticality, right? So in this case, say they are coming in with finding a medium, and then you can elevate that to high, or you can have different types of information to correlate from your aggregation, and then updating those different labels or the values that you have for the severity. All right, so you just have to have the target ID as well as the product Amazon resource name, and then after which you can easily update it. So this can be applied not just for config findings, but for any of your other findings that you're ingesting over into AWS Security Hub. And then with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Rowan and Matt if there's any other questions. Yeah.
I guess what I could touch base on, I did mention that Security Hub is a planar class or a dashboard that obviously present you with all of the security findings. Maybe we can clarify to our audience what other services rather than Macy, which I've mentioned, config, which we talked about today, and IAM Analyzer, does feed or inject all of their security findings in Security Hub. We have Inspector, I do believe, right? It does inject findings as well. And speaking of Inspector, that gets me to another interesting use case or an idea. Once I guess you get all of these security findings, and as Leanne was saying, get prioritized with its priority high, medium, low. You can use automation in the background to mitigate these alerts or mitigate these findings. So you can leverage System Manager. Once you find an alert, let's say, for example, you realize there is one of your AMEs or one of the EC2s missing a patch, or there is a critical patch being released for security or so on. But once that gets identified, you could use System Manager in the background to go and actually update this AME or EC2 with the required patch and make it available for your EC2 fleets. So these automation, you don't really need to go and click on things or so on, or run commands. You can configure this workflow automatically to run in the background, especially for critical and high priority findings. Matt, do you have any questions or?
Not really, no. I was listening intently along. I'd also guess that guard duty's in there as well, streaming events into Security Hub. The first use case that came to mind is probably just having potentially a rogue instance or something out there that hasn't actually been successfully able to run its patch for whatever reason. And it just might be quick and easy when you've got a fleet just to go ahead and terminate that instance without worrying too much about it, but giving you the confidence that there's nothing running there without the patch level that you need.
Great. So I guess my last question would be, what is our next tutorial, Leanne, in your YouTube channel? What that would be about?
Yep. So one of the upcoming tutorials will be on IAM Access Analyzer to help us detect all this cross-account or outside of the account and outside of the organization access. Other than that, we could have another one on cross-site scripting against a content management system plugin. So that one is work in progress. So definitely stay tuned for all these upcoming tutorials on ethical hacking, penetration testing, and AWS security. All right. So thanks so much, Rowan. Thanks so much, Matt, for the invite.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for joining us today. And I guess I'll pass on to Carlos and Samir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rowan. Appreciate that. We're just going to get into some database updates now. I'll just bring in my friend Samir, and I'll just remove him from the stream. Welcome, Samir. Samir is our specialist TAM out of Singapore. He exclusively works with enterprise support customers. He's always looking to improve operational efficiency, scaling capability, et cetera, and he's been on our show quite a few times, as I mentioned at the top. Welcome, Samir.
Hey, hi, Carlos. It's always good to be back here.
Samir, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I must have had a little bit of a drop there.
Okay.
Just welcomed you to the show. Thanks for joining. We got a few updates to share this month. First updates are around database migration service, and now that database migration service supports new endpoints for sources and targets. Now the first one is for customers who are looking to modernize their mainframe workloads and migrate their mainframe workloads to perhaps AWS managed services. So, Database Migration Service, or DMS, as we call it for short, now supports IBM DB2 ZOS as a source. So, Samir, with this release, I'm just thinking about this, and didn't we already have support for IBM DB2 as a source for DMS?
Yes, we have supported IBM DB2 LUW as a DMS source endpoint for a long time now. That's the Linux, Unix, Windows version of DB2. That's what LUW stands for. And the newly announced support in DMS is for DB2 ZOS or ZOS for some of the American audience that we have got there. It's the mainframe version of DB2.
Yeah, and I know with DMS we have a boatload of backend targets for DMS. Just thinking, are there any limits as to which targets we can use when leveraging the DB2 Z or Z OS as a source?
You can use source endpoint from DB2 ZOS to migrate to any of the supported target endpoints. But there are other considerations which may limit your option, such as table and column level transformation is not supported yet. Like you said earlier, DMS supports a lot of different endpoints, both for source as well as for target. And then there are these combinations of source and targets that you can achieve there. I always encourage customers to refer to our documentation and consult with their AWS TAM or AWS solution architect just to get the best practices and the right configurations going right from the beginning.
Yeah, that's really sound advice and a really handy source of information. Just thinking about this further, right, you think of the Batman and Robin scenario. We've got, the database migration service, but we've also got the schema conversion tool, right, which some customers would utilize, in parallel when they migrate their databases. So with this release, is it safe to say that the schema conversion tool, or SCT, also supports DB2 ZOS as well?
Yes, and you have got a very good analogy there with the Batman and Robin for SCT and DMS. And yes, schema conversion tool does support DB2 ZOS as source, and customers can now use it to convert schema from DB2 ZOS to Amazon RDS MySQL, Amazon RDS PostgreSQL, and Amazon Aurora engines.
Awesome stuff. There's so many reasons, right, why our customers take advantage of our solutions. And of course, there's the cost and operational simplification that a release like this presents. What are some of the main drivers for customers, when thinking about mainframe migrations, right? What are some of the main drivers for them to move into AWS while leveraging DMS?
All right. One of them, you mentioned it yourself, mainframe modernization. We have got a mainframe modernization program to help such customers. There are also customers who are replatforming and modernizing their application. They are breaking down their application tier into microservices or making them more scalable and bring them to EC2, EKS, or ECS. And in those cases, they want to also break down their databases and kind of move parts of their database to a different database service to manage database service. That's one of the use cases. But there are also customers who are building data lake on AWS in S3, and they want to migrate their data, which is in the legacy systems or in the in existing critical systems running on mainframe, and they want to get that data into S3. That's another use case there.
Yeah, and it's important to note that this is available now, right, across our regions where DMS is actually available. So that's available for customers now. And sticking with the DMS releases, there's a Babelfish, news kind of returns here with DMS to the What's New stream this month. And for those who aren't familiar with Babelfish, it's a feature that adds, SQL Server compatibility to Aurora Postgres, which essentially allows Aurora to understand commands from applications written for SQL Server pretty much gives it a bilingual feel to it, right? It's got different language that it essentially supports. And the latest for Babelfish, I guess today, is that it is now supported by DMS as a target. And so the first thing that comes to mind, Samir, is how is this different from using Aurora PostgreSQL directly as a target?
Right. Aurora PostgreSQL is already supported as a target, but customers who are migrating from SQL Server to Aurora PostgreSQL, they would want a native experience. They would want to migrate their data as is with SQL Server compatible data types and formatting options. Now that we offer Babelfish for Aurora PostgreSQL as a target, it will be easier for such customers to migrate their SQL Server workload to Aurora Postgres.
So does that support both full load and change data capture?
No, at the moment, it only supports full data load.
Okay, so that's an important consideration for our customers that are looking to migrate, that there will be no CDC, at least initially, for that. Then that brings me to, is there anything else? Is there any other sort of considerations that customers should be watching out for?
Like we talked about when we talked about the DB2 ZOS announcement, TMS supports a lot of different endpoints, and not all endpoints work the same. Some features are exclusive to some endpoints because they also depend on the engine that it supports. So it's always a good idea to refer to our documentation, which provides a more comprehensive list of supported features and gotchas and things to look out for. One specific aspect that customers migrating from SQL Server should be careful about is the case sensitivity of the object names. In some cases, such as when you have got tables with identity or computed columns, and you have got mixed case names for the target table, you must create a transformation rule. TMS supports that, where you can define a transformation rule and convert table names to lowercase within your TMS task.
Yeah,
so that's one of the things to look out for.
Yeah, that's a sneaky way to have some of your applications sort of standard procedures kind of fall apart, with case sensitivity. That's a really good call out. And again, this one is also available everywhere where DMS is available. So feel free to check that out today if you wish. Just moving on to our next announcement, it's around Amazon Aurora, which now supports Postgres 14. And I'm sure with Postgres 14, there are a lot of new features for customers to take advantage of. What are the particular standouts that you want to call out here, Samir?
I think from the perspective of customers that I have been talking to, and the other specialists in the field that I have been talking to, the most important highlight here is Babelfish for Aurora PostgreSQL 2.1. That goes out with this release of Aurora Postgres. It has many new features to improve the SQL Server compatibility. So there are now more applications and more application code that will be compatible with Aurora PostgreSQL. With this new release, we also now support Scram password encryption method for Aurora PostgreSQL. Last but not the least, there are a lot of performance improvements in general, but specifically I want to call out areas like parallel queries, partitioning, and logical replication. And I know a lot of customers use these. These improvements will help uplift overall performance and throughput of the system.
Yeah, I think that Scram feature is something that Rovan and Liang, who were just in the stream, would appreciate from a security perspective. And I think customers from AWS would also be aware that we're not only looking to support the latest versions, but from time to time we also deprecate older versions to just ensure we're constantly uplifting your security and feature base. So customers really should have a look into their estate, identify if they're running perhaps deprecation candidates, and update to the latest Postgres 14. But in order for them to do that, it has to be available. So is this available in all regions, Samir?
Yeah, all regions where Aurora PostgreSQL is supported, it's available there, yes.
And what would be sort of the approach for the customers to upgrade, if you can highlight that?
They can use InPlace Upgrade, which will require some downtime. Customers who are running critical workload, such as things that needs to be available 24/7, in the banking or financial industries, they would want to minimize the downtime as much as possible. And in those cases, they can use logical replication to sort of set up a new copy of the database, upgrade this new instance, rather the new cluster, and then let the replication run and catch up. And once it's all caught up, they can fail over to the new instance, or rather to the new cluster in this case.
Yeah,
So yeah, that way they can minimize the downtime.
Awesome pattern for them to follow. Thanks for that, Samir. And I guess let's move on to our next and last update for this month. And we see Amazon Aurora Postgres compatible edition now supporting zero downtime patching, which is awesome. And in the past, we've talked about how important it is for customers to apply patches and minor versions, immediately as soon as they're available. So I can understand why this, is an important release based on that. What are your thoughts and highlights for this release, Samir?
Yeah, like I said, customers should be applying patches and upgrades as soon as possible, but usually customers had to choose between availability and staying up to date with latest patches and minor version release. With this zero downtime patching or ZDP, they will be now not have to choose. They won't have to choose between applying a patch and compromising business continuity. So that kind of improve the uptime and availability of the databases.
Yeah, so that's pretty awesome. But I guess that brings me to the question of how it works. Will customers need to enable a parameter to use this feature? I mean, obviously, we'll also expect some magic to happen to the existing client connections, let's say in a production environment, right, to keep that continuity. Can you explain how it works?
Yeah, there is a lot of magic behind the scenes. Actually, what happens during any typical database upgrade is the engine goes through a restart. But what ZDP does is it tries to preserve client connections that are made to Aurora PostgreSQL, and during that whole process is try to retain those connections. When ZDP is enabled on a cluster, and that basically means you should be on a supported version of Aurora, and when it's enabled, it will automatically try and preserve those connections when you're trying to upgrade. Okay,
so that sounds pretty cool, but that makes me think, hey, our applications can expect no impact at all. Would that be, the right sort of thinking?
Well, just to call out again that this is only available for minor version upgrades and for patches, and even though the connections are preserved, the engine restart can cause a drop in throughput. But that drop will typically be for a very small amount of time. It is typically going to be below a minute, and in most cases, it's going to be just a few seconds.
Okay, all right. So that's pretty handy, and I guess maybe I'll take a second to maybe look at perhaps a scenario where maybe ZDP may not be successful when it tries to switch across. Are there any scenarios that you can foresee there, Samir, where that does happen?
Yeah, there are some scenarios such as a long-running query or a transaction that's in progress. ZDP may need to cancel them in order to complete. There are other scenarios where, for example, if you're using DDLs in your workload, or you have temporary tables that you use heavily in your workload, or when you have table locks acquired by the workload, in those cases, ZDP may have to cancel these open transactions. Another thing that can interfere with ZDP is parameter changes. So as a best practice, run upgrades, even though there is zero downtime possible now, use upgrade procedures or upgrade operations, run them only during your maintenance activity during off-peak hours when you're not running batch processes. Do not combine them with other activities such as creating an index on a very large table, or running parameter changes during the same time. Avoid mixing those activities together.
Yeah, those are pretty good call-outs. Thanks for those insights. And that covers that upgrade. But before we go, Samir, if I can take a second, in one of our past sessions, I believe it was back in our March show, we talked about support for always-on availability group for RDS SQL Server. And what we're going to talk about here, folks, is actually on the slide. But there was actually a question back then about agent job replication, which I think we have a little bit more information on to share with the audience.
Yeah, I remember we discussed about customers having to go through an extra step when they set up a new job. They would need to fail over and create the job in the other AZ as well. so that it ensures high availability of the jobs that they have created. I remember that, yeah.
Exactly. And you know what? Now, we have Amazon RDS for SQL. It now supports SQL Server Agent Job Replication. So they heard us. Perhaps it came from the stream. We'll take credit for that. But that definitely makes things a lot simpler for our customers. They don't need to go through with that extra step that you talked about. Samir, one thing that I do want to ask is, will it be automatically enabled, right? And how will customers use this feature?
Yeah. Before I get to answering that question, I just want to call out that our service team is always looking for feedback and new ideas, and most of it comes from our customers. So if you're a customer out there and you're listening to this, please do get in touch with your account team, talk to Carlos or Samir in your respective areas, and do let them know about what you're looking for from a certain service, and they would get your voice back to our service team. And at some point in time, it will likely make it to the service.
Absolutely.
And to answer your question, yeah, customers would have to enable it explicitly by running a stored procedure, which will then start replicating agent jobs.
Awesome. And that just brings me, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to add them into the comments. We'll either answer them live on the stream, or we'll come and get back to you within the chat. I think that concludes our database section. We'll now be moving over to our compute lounge. We'll be bringing Mr. Matty Platts and Robin Omar. Welcome back.
Thank you. You guys, I love that discussion on zero downtime patching. It just reminded me of all the times that in non-production environments, there was a bit of friction just to get that patching pushed out. But with that, it's just an extra accelerator to get the patching in. I can see we actually had a question come in as well, just in regards to zero downtime patching for Postgres 13. So I'm not sure, Samir, if you've got that handy, whether that's enabled on that previous version, or if it only starts from 14.
Okay. Sorry, I was just gonna say that I'll put that answer in the chat. There are versions. There are minor versions on version 12, 13, and 14 where it's going to be supported. I just put the detailed information in the comment section.
So it sounds like it's most likely a yes, with maybe an asterisk there. But yeah, we'll look forward to your answer on that one, Samir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Samir.
Alrighty, Compute Lounge.
Do it.
There's a few things to talk about today. Bit of an anchor towards Outposts again, so we'll spend a bit of time there. But to kick things off, just a heads up that there's the next generation memory optimized R6 ID instances that have been released. So for anyone that's not too familiar, that's R6, which is our 3rd gen Intel, I being the Intel, and D being the local NVMe disk version. So, compared to R5, we've got a new size. We've got a 32 extra large, which has a ton of CPU in it, 33% more than what we previously had. Another big change for this next generation is that it's got always-on memory encryption as well. So definitely something, if security is in mind, something that you might want to look to turn on. Really, the use case for the R6s is really in memory databases or any big data analytics that need that local NVMe data crunching as well.
And I guess with the size of the disk now, it's up to like 7 tera or something.
7.6 T, yeah.
That's definitely a strong use case for a in-memory database, and it ties really well with the encryption, because usually if you have an RDS database or any database, not an EC2, practically you want to encrypt the database. Now you put it in EC2, and then in memory, this is when you want to look into also the encryption functionality of it. It's a great, I guess, use case for in-memory databases or maybe big data and analytic space.
Yeah,
that's right.
That's a super impressive, jump, right, to that 7.6 terabyte. Like you're running the R5D generations. I think that's the previous gen. And perhaps you're running out of space. I think now that that's available, customers can just go ahead and upgrade to this version. And it's important to note, right? Customers sometimes too. Some of the instance changes can be a little bit simply, the case of a stop-start, or perhaps you can utilize your auto-scaling groups to help you move from one instance to another without causing a lot of changes in your backend. But this is a super impressive release. And I think one thing, I'm just looking at the release notes as well, 15% better price performance for such an impressive instance. So this is awesome.
Yeah, it's very cool. Outposts. So, I mean, we touched on this last month, but there's just a few more releases to talk through. But we've just recently released EC2 Dedicated Hosts are now available on AWS Outposts. So what does that mean? It means that if you've got software that's bound to either CPU cores, or it's a bit more closer to the underlying infrastructure, with dedicated hosts, you're able to provision a host, and that software now can effectively be bound to that hardware. And extending this to Outposts just gives our customers a lot more flexibility as well in relation to where they run some of these applications and what they can do to contain potentially some of that licensing bleed.
I guess to add one thing here, Matt, if you missed our session last month, I personally missed it, being sick. So Outpost is one of the managed on-premise services, so you can run your workload on the Outpost within your data center. We ship the hardware for you, so it's quite a great use case for things like workloads that require very, very, very low latency. So gaming and so on, or maybe you need it in a country that we don't have a region in, even with all of the distributed regions AWS have. If we don't have a region in one of these countries that you require to have an AWS presence, that will be actually a good solution for your workload. And from there, you can use all of the APIs and so on to connect to AWS as well. So it's a great use case for low latency workloads, very, very restricted, regulated as well workloads that doesn't, if you haven't gone through the regulator requirement to be able to use public cloud, that might be one of the other use cases. And also, if there's no AWS region within the country that you would like to use your workload in. So, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, I think that's an important note, Robin, that latency is so critical for some of the application teams, for some of our customers, but also from another lens, right? It's super important for our customers, to be able to take advantage of the fact that they're keeping their existing licensing, on a number of levels. Like, for example, this may, customers can create a better opportunity to use these existing assets. And, just talking to other customers in the past, in some cases, it gives them, an opportunity to perhaps even negotiate better licensing pricing as well because of the way they're leveraging it. So there's so many positive things that can come out of this. So this is a fantastic release.
Yeah, that's right. Call out too is that it's launching with multiple instance support. So if you're not quite sure how many sockets you want to assign to that instance, you've got the ability to play around and change it as well, which is good to see. Rovan, for someone who did miss the last live stream we did, just as you, and I'm sure you know this, but Outpost comes in two configurations. So we've got the Outpost server, and then you've got the Outpost rack, if you want the full rack. 1 RU and 2 RU options as well, with Graviton and Intel. I believe, don't quote me on this, I believe that the Intel ones are effectively the C6 ID versions. So there's also some NVMe baked in there as well.
Oh, thank you.
Speaking of Outpost Rack, that leads us on to our next feature, which is EC2 placement groups now have actually been extended all the way into Outposts. So when you launch an instance, you're able to specify host level spread within the rack itself. So obviously we want HA at every level, as many levels as you can bake it into, and with this you're able to specify that let's run instances across the different hosts within those Outpost racks.
The interesting point though, because we, as an AWS, if you're using one of our AZs or regions, AWS does that automatically in the background. So we distribute the EC2s across different racks. So to make sure it's as highly available as possible, just in case if there's a problem with power or something in one of the racks, it doesn't actually impact the rest of the EC2. So the EC2 placement group will probably do the same job, but then in Outpost in your data center. So really good call out there.
That's right. Yeah.
And this plays to the theme that we like to talk about, right? Everything fails all the time, and this is a really good HA feature. And like you mentioned, Robin, like this reminds me of the colo days where you would allocate your servers into different racks. Make sure that you were under different fire chambers. You had different power cycles into everything. And this is just another way. But when I think about the co-location lens, you would usually reserve that for your super critical applications, right? Only because of the cost involved. Whereas now with this, from my point of view, just looking at this now, you can do this for a number of different, maybe your next level tier down in terms of criticality, but still give it that same high availability within a Postgres. So that's super cool.
Yeah, very much so. I thought I'd mention as well, just before we move on from Outposts, for anyone who hasn't actually looked at the pricing, it comes in 3 options. It comes with a no upfront, a partial, and an all upfront as well. So if maybe a customer is more familiar with just procuring local infrastructure, there's an option there for an all upfront and get it in to have a bit of a play as well. So, all right, moving on. ECS. So there's just a quick note to mention here. We've simplified the way that ECS now works with the capacity provider and integrating with auto scaling groups. So for ECS being our container service, containers will obviously have to scale like everything else on AWS. And what we've done is we've effectively reduced the reliance on our what happens behind the scenes, I suppose, maybe taking a step back, is that the auto scaling and capacity provider in ECS uses a target tracking scaling policy to effectively start scaling the instances underneath it. But it used to do that through the use of a scaling plan. So what the team have done now is eliminate that need for that scaling plan, and now it's able to directly interface with the auto scaling groups and that target tracking mechanism.
Oh, so essentially, we just cut out just a piece in the sort of pattern, just I guess a middleman as such. Is that?
Pretty much, yeah. And if you kind of take that into the broader releases that we've made across ECS around auto scaling and deeper integration of provisioning underlying compute within the containers, what you're seeing here is obviously much tighter integration that's going to allow our customers to scale more efficiently and scale more quickly as well.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking the way we usually do things, I would imagine customers are already using these capacity providers. There's no change, right? With this release, they can continue using the scaling plans as they are, or they can use this new pattern, right?
Yeah.
That's right.
Cool.
Awesome. And last but not least, probably one of my favorite releases for this month is we mentioned a few live streams ago that there is an upcoming GA for EKS Anywhere with bare metal support, but that's now been released. So we've got general availability. Effectively, it's an operating system that you can put on your own on-premise infrastructure, and it's going to allow you to have that shared consistency of configuration of bare metal infrastructure on-prem and also interfacing it with the cloud. So it'll be good to see not only, I think from my point of view as someone that's managed clusters in the past, it really kind of just reduces that complexity and overhead. There's not too much differentiated lifting running a few servers in an on-premise environment. So this will just kind of standardize that, give you an off-the-shelf OS that integrates directly back into AWS.
So with EKS Anywhere, considering it's not on actually running on AWS, do customers get support?
That's right. Yeah, good question, Rose. So it's free to use. Absolutely, go and download it, install it on some old tin you've got running. But if you do want some help, we do actually have EKS Anywhere support subscription. And what's good about that subscription is that you don't have to turn it on for all your clusters. You can say potentially I've got a production cluster, I've got a dev cluster, and I've got some kind of non-production cluster as well. And I only just want that support on production. So you can enable and purchase that for one of the clusters, not everything that is configured in your on-premise environment.
super. That's really good. So it still provides assistance to customers even when they run it on premise. They don't need to go and subscribe for the support plan or so on. There is a monthly one with AWS. It's just per cluster or support subscription for EKS. That's really good.
That's right. That's right. I believe we're coming up to time. Carlos, did you want to maybe add our friends back in? And
yes.
Hey, Samir.
Yeah, Samir.
Hey.
So Samir, we've got an answer to the previous question in regards to Postgres 13 and zero downtime. Did you want to just take a moment before we close just to go ahead and respond to that question?
Yes, so it's supported in all the supported Aurora PostgreSQL versions, but you would have to be on a certain minor version or anything higher than that to be able to get benefit from ZDP. To name them, it's supported on Aurora PostgreSQL 14.3, 13.7, 12.11, 11.16, 10.21 onwards.
Perfect. Thank you. I hope that answers your question.
Higher versions.
Thank you very much, Samir. I really appreciate you coming back to answer that question.
No problem.
Well, that's a wrap for this week. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out with us for an hour. Just a reminder that we stream live every second Friday of the month. So looking forward to having you guys as guests and the team back this time next month.
It was good to be back. It was lots of fun. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Have a great weekend. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.